Okay, we have a couple more people join. It's no big deal, but I think we're going to get started. So hello everyone, and thank you for coming to our final Eagle Lead presentation of the semester, focusing on community involvement. Eagle Lead stands for Leadership, Engagement, and Development, and is a speaker series debuting on campus this semester. Throughout Eagle Lead, each college at the university will have 3 feature weeks, including an introduction, a leadership topic, and a speaker from the community, which is what we're having tonight. Tonight we have Representative Jill Billings from the Wisconsin State Assembly here to talk about community involvement and just a little bit about her position and what she does. After the presentation, there will be time for questions, and on a final note, this session is being recorded for future viewing. But without further ado, Representative Billings.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you tonight. I'm very cognizant of the fact that finals are coming up soon. And so I'm not going to take a ton of time, and hopefully you'll have some questions for me. But I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. If we were in person, I'd be handing out candy right now to keep people engaged and get your sugar, giving you sugar to keep your energy levels up. But anyway, we'll do what we can now with what we've got with Zoom because of COVID. And if anybody wants to comment or share later on what it's like being a student during time of COVID, I would like to really hear input from you on that too. So I'm State Representative Jill Billings. I represent the city of La Crosse, town of Shelby, a little bit of town of Shelby, and then of course the town of Campbell out on French Island. You may be familiar with that part of my district. It's been in the news lately as having PFAS in the water because of some, well, probably it's multifactorial, but in part because of firefighting foam that was used out in the airport area during earlier crash years ago, and also just training. So I'm working on that issue now. If anybody has questions about that, we can talk about that a little bit later, but that's a very topical thing. The governor was here last week with us talking about that issue. And I actually did a statewide interview on Capital City Sunday on that issue, right from this little corner of my guest bedroom. It was hard because they wanted me to sit right, like close up against this wall, so they had the right angle. And I was like in the space this big, talking about this very serious issue. That's some of the fun behind the scenes things in a job like this. But I was elected 9 years ago in a special election after Act 10. And I know a lot of you, it's time flies. And so you were probably in middle school or maybe even elementary school during the protests at the Capitol. And our senator was recalled. And so our state assembly representative ran against him, Jen Schilling, and she won the Senate seat. So her seat was open. I really had not expected to become a state representative. In high school, I did not have dreams of being a politician. I have never been someone to say I want to be president of the United States one day, but I feel very grateful and happy to be in this position that I'm in now. So I ran for office and I ended up winning my seat. It was 4 Democrats in the primary, actually 3 Democrats and 1 Republican who was pretending to be a Democrat. That's what people were doing at that time. And then I had a general election and I won, and I was in Madison like that. And because I came in halfway through the term, I had no extra, I didn't get the usual orientation. It was a kind of a hard way to enter into the Capitol. And there was a lot of hardness of heart there at that point. Everybody was mad at everybody else, and rightfully so. I understand that, why I don't judge people on that. But I entered just after Act 10. And so when I started my job, I just sit down in the side parlor while everybody's arguing out on the floor. And I would just be like, so what area of Wisconsin are you from? And what bills are you working on? And what do you like to read? Just kind of those kind of getting to know you questions. And Republicans would look at me like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be talking to us. We don't talk to each other. But that was the way I functioned, and it worked well. I got a bill through that first year, which was pretty amazing looking back on it now. And I've been always fortunate to have champions on both sides of the aisle helping me getting legislation through. I'm going to do a quick primer I'm sorry if there are some political science people listening in, but as a state representative, there are 99 of us. So I don't have a huge ego about this because I know that there are 99. It's not like I'm the governor, but I am honored to represent La Crosse and some areas surrounding. There are 99 in the assembly. There are 33 senators. And that makes up the legislature. We each have our big, beautiful chambers that we deliberate and debate the bills in. We're lucky to have an incredible Capitol. I have an office on the 3rd floor, and I still, when I drive to Madison, I'll come up East Washington and look at the Capitol and think, oh, am I lucky to work in this building? It's still not jaded about that. I don't take any of that for granted. In fact, I've been running, like one morning, running to a committee meeting or between committee meetings, and the light comes in through the rotunda and it just lights things up, and it stopped me in my tracks. And just the beauty of my workplace just takes my breath away. And I miss it during COVID that we're not there as often. So the governor also has a wing that's his, or a little branch that's his. And we have Governor Evers, a Democratic governor now, who I think is really fabulous, someone who cares a lot about education. He was on the Board of Regents, so that's good for UWL, that he understands higher education really well and understands the importance of funding it. So he's had 2 generous budgets. His last budget and this coming budget has been generous budgets after years of not having generous budgets for the UW system. And then, of course, there's the Supreme Court. They have their own little area in their wing. Our Supreme Court really kind of leans Republican right now, with kind of one of the members who kind of can go either way. The interesting thing is that that Supreme Court justice who kind of goes either way was he worked for Governor Walker, the Republican previous governor, who was a Republican. But on the Supreme Court, he's been one of the people who has kind of really, I think, interpreted the law, trying to leave politics out of it in a better way than some of the others. As a legislator, I serve on committees. Really, my area of focus, I would say, if I had to choose 3, would be, I hate to just choose 3, but if I had to choose 3, I would say children's issues. I'm the ranking member of Children and Family. I am the chair of our bipartisan, bicameral Children's Caucus. So we educate legislators on children's issues. And so I'm the co-chair of that caucus. I am in the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Board. I'm the Democratic Assembly representative on that statewide committee, was appointed by the governor, the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Board. So children's issues are really important to me. I know I was lucky to be born in a relatively healthy family. We have our craziness in my family too, like everybody else, but and I grew up with not a ton of money in our family. We had 7 kids, but I always had a place to sleep at night. I shared a bed with my sister, but it was always a safe, warm place to sleep. My mom always had dinner for us. Sometimes it was fish sticks and canned green beans, but we had dinner together as a family. So I want all children to have that. I want all children to be valued in Wisconsin. So I am happy to be a leader in that area. One of my notable bills is a safe harbor bill that says children under 18 who are trafficked cannot be arrested for prostitution. Currently in Wisconsin, children can be arrested for prostitution, which is crazy. So if a child is sold for sex, they can be arrested for prostitution. Now, it's illegal to have sex with a child in Wisconsin. It's called rape. But for some reason, when that money changes hands, and most often it goes to someone who's selling the child, suddenly that child who is a victim suddenly becomes a criminal. So this is a bill that I'm pushing this term, and I've got some good support on that. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully that bill can be passed through. I've talked to a lot of anti-human trafficking groups around the state. And this is a important, really important issue. And I mean, human trafficking of children exists in all 72 counties in Wisconsin. It's often hidden, but it exists. So that's work that I'm happy to be doing. My second issue that I'm probably is one of my main issues is colleges and universities. So I've been on that committee since I was elected. This year, I'm taking a break because I'm on the building commission and I chair the higher education subcommittee on the building commission. That's the big granddaddy committee that puts its billions of dollars toward, well, $1.3 billion toward projects on university campuses. The other half of it is the state office buildings. So right now I'm working with our campus to get Prairie Springs 2 passed. And that's, we'll see, that's going to be a bit of a lift because Republicans have wanted to take some funding away from that committee. I think there's too much funding there, but we saw in Van Nuys in UW-Madison where there's like stuff falling off the building, big concrete slabs are falling off the building. Luckily it happened on a weekend, so there weren't a lot of students walking around, but someone could have died. And I've toured a lot of buildings from the rooftop, really, in my high heels out there climbing on the roof, down to the basements, the dusty basements, looking at, when I go to a campus, I was at River Falls and they're like, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to talk to your administration. I want to tour your building and bring in the mechanical people, the people that, do the maintenance in the building. And I want to talk to students. And so it's awesome. It's a great, great committee. And as chair, I am incredibly lucky. I've learned so much. And I've toured almost every single campus we have in Wisconsin. Of course, my favorite is UWL, but it's been great to meet chancellors and students on all campuses. I love talking to students. I got to say, I don't think I would have moved to La Crosse if there hadn't been a university here. I think it adds so much to our community to have students in our community. So I really like that work. And finally, probably substance abuse. I'm ranking member on substance abuse and prevention. I was on the governor's task force on heroin and opioid abuse, and we passed almost 30 pieces of legislation in the last 6 or 7 years. And I'm on the State Council of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse. I was appointed by the governor to that group, statewide group. And addiction is just a terrible disease. And I want to do what I can to follow smart evidence-based practice to help with people who are suffering from that disease, including one of my extended family members. Who I love very much, but who's in the wind right now with addiction. So I think so many of our families have loved ones or friends who've experienced addiction. And so I've done a lot of work on that, and there's so much more to do, so much more to do. One of the bills I'm working on right now, it was requested by law enforcement. It increases a penalty for distributing fentanyl, manufacturing or possessing for distribution, dealing fentanyl, to bring it up to where heroin is right now. Right now, for some reason, it's not at a parity with heroin, and that's where it needs to be. Our overdose numbers are increasing in large part because of fentanyl. So that's one of my bills I'm working on right now. And so how I got where I am today, I started, like I said, I never dreamed about being a legislator, but I guess in college, I ended up becoming a senator in college. And then I was president of the student body. And then I started in La Crosse and ended up on the county board. When I first moved here, I taught English as a second language and citizenship to Hmong adults. It was an awesome job. We were at Christ Episcopal Church, and we relied a lot on volunteers like students like you, and Viterbo students and retired people would come and work with us and Hmong adults. I loved working with that population. They were motivated to learn. There were no discipline problems. And after 10 years, we worked our way out of a job. All of our students went out and got jobs or went to tech college. And so I continued with the sewing program because I wanted to stay in touch with I thought I'm going to lose my Hmong friends if I don't see them every week. So I stayed, and then they taught me how to sew and quilt. So I learned from them and I just wrote grants to keep the program going. So that was a wonderful job when I first moved here. It was awesome. And then I started on the county board, which I really loved. Local government, and I got to help create our OWI treatment court instead of just locking people up for drunk driving. It was a better way of dealing with people who were, a lot of them were suffering from addiction, and getting them into treatment and checking in with the judge and having immediate sanctions or rewards, depending on behavior. And it's just a better way of treating addiction. So I was happy to help start that with then Judge Perlich and Judge Pissell back in the day. This was 15 years ago, I think. And the governor was here 2 weeks ago and talking about treatment and diversion. So, the work continues just on the state level. So anyway, from the county board, then I ran for state assembly, and that's how I got here. When I moved to La Crosse, I came here because of a boy. That was my husband. He had gotten out of my then husband. He had graduated from law school, and I agreed to follow him. You know how you got to figure that out after college. It's like, okay, do I follow you? Do you follow me? What do we do? And so I had said I would follow him. I gave up my job in marketing in Madison and came here, and thinking that we'd stay for a few years and then move back to Minneapolis or Madison. And like so many people, I fell in love with La Crosse, and ended up very happily here now for over 30 years. I was asked about tips for being successful in my job. I think working together, like I said, when I started, I just found my Republican champions and worked with them. I think you have to be patient. That, like my human trafficking bill, this is the third time I've introduced it. Why? It should not be that hard to get a bill passed, but first maybe law enforcement has a problem with it. So we educate law enforcement, and then it's like we get that settled. And then some DAs raise their head from Outagamie County, and we deal with that. It's like whack-a-mole, it feels like, there's all these groups. It's like constant education of people. No, this does not legalize prostitution. This just makes sure children can't be charged. And no, there's just all these questions that we are constantly educating people on. So you have to be patient, and you just have to constantly work with people, meet them where they're at, and hopefully they'll come to your side. I think the other thing is, in my job, you have to love people. Like if you don't like people, this would be torture. This job would be just torture. The week before COVID hit, I was going to see 2,000 people that week. Between all the speaking engagements, it was right at the end of session. So my staff had kind of saved when people in La Crosse had said, can Jill meet with this group, and can she talk to this group, and give a speech at this fundraiser on human trafficking or whatever it was. And also the governor's conference on tourism. And for 8 years, I was on that glitter and rainbows committee that I loved. I was ranking member on tourism. Child abuse, neglect, or tourism. Guess what's a lot happier there? but I love children, and that's I'm passionate about that. So the tourism conference had 1,000 people. So I counted between the 1,000 people that I was going to meet, talk to, visit, shake hands with, and then the governor's council conference on tourism. I realized before the governor shut down the state of Wisconsin, I had been on the board of public health in the county board. That was my committee. Health and Human Services. And I knew every 2 years we got training on pandemics because they're like, it's going to come. We're going to have a pandemic. So this is what you need to know. And as a Board of Health. So I'm like, I am a super spreader. I'm going to see 2,000 people and shaking hands and hugging people and talking. And so I started canceling stuff before everybody else did. I was lucky that the governor signed my bills into a week before we shut down. The governor flew here, signed my bills into some of my heroin and opioid bills into law. And then I flew with him in the plane back to Madison, which is not as glamorous as it sounds. It's a small plane. It was scary. It was like this, but I was glad that I got to have that opportunity before we shut down. So those are my tips to being successful in my job. I think you got to love people, genuinely love people, and want to serve them. You're a public servant, and I think you have to be curious and interested in people. You have to be able to listen to concerns. You have to have some thick skin. I'll tell you, I got the worst letter this spring with COVID. People were all upset. I get that. I got the worst letter I've ever received from a constituent who was upset because we were shutting down. And, really, I felt bad because my staff had to read it first. And so you kind of have to have thick skin. I grew up with 4 brothers. I've got thick skin. That's fine with me. So I think those are kind of the biggest. Be able to work together with other people, communicate with the people that you represent, tell them what you're doing. That was kind of hard for me at the beginning. I was raised a German Lutheran. It's like, my mom would always be like, don't toot your own horn. Well, when you're in elected office, you're always talking about what you're doing. I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And sometimes that was hard for me in the beginning. But luckily I have good staff. I have 1 full-time and a half-time staff. And I'm very lucky. They're really great. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without my staff. They help kind of with some constituent work where people write into my office and they want me to sign on to a bill, or they, want to talk to me, about fair elections or whatever the issue is. During COVID, we had a lot of people who were struggling to get their unemployment insurance. And so we did a lot of work on that, making sure that, or trying to help people get their unemployment insurance. There was a guy out on French Island who said, he wrote my home, and he said, I'm dipping into my retirement. My daughter's had to move back in with me. My son has had to move back in with me. I'm dipping into my retirement. Can you help us? They're not getting their unemployment insurance. And he didn't put his phone number. So I wrote back to him, like hand wrote a letter saying, I'm going to work with my staff on this. This is my office number. This is my office email for quicker communication. If you have email, but contact us there too. And so we helped him out. His daughter ended up getting her unemployment, his son. And he said, you saved us. You saved my family. I will vote for you forever. So those are the good ones when you can help somebody and you hear back from them and you feel like, yes, I helped someone in a very immediate way there. Ways to get involved in the community. I was asked to talk about ways that I think students can get involved in the community. I don't know that I have any incredible insights here, but from what I thought immediately about volunteer work or internships, because it opens you up to this whole new group of people, right? If you're going to a workplace every day or a volunteer place. When we had students volunteering at the friendship program, it was such a fabulous thing. I remember knocking on doors. Also, when I was on the county board in the student area, people told me don't bother talking to students because they don't vote for spring elections, and they move every 4 years. But I liked visiting with students. And so I remember knocking on doors and talking to someone who had an internship at the jail. And what great insights she had, because we were just talking about programming in the jail, and she was a recreational management I think it was recreational management major. And so she was working with people in the jail. And so she had great insight that no one else in my district probably had. So it was a great thing for me to knock on doors, student doors, and talk to someone like that. And I think it was good for her to volunteer in the community because you meet all these people who are outside your bubble at the university. I would say also maybe join an organization. When I joined my church, and I'm not pushing people to be religious if you're not comfortable being religious, but when I joined my church, it was like I had 240 people to my bubble all of a sudden, and people that were pretty caring and supportive. So for me, that's been a good way to kind of meet people. When I first came to town, I thought La Crosse was not real. It was not as friendly as I thought it was going to be. So volunteering, joining organizations, and starting work really opened me up to other people that I could develop relationships with. Get off campus when you can, not just to 3rd Street at the bars with other students, but to other places in town, and explore. Don't be shy about, when old ladies like me in the marsh are like, hey, how's it going? I think there's people in our community who want to connect with students. We love that energy. And so that's always nice. I walk in the marsh almost 5 days a week. And I like seeing the students there. It's good energy. And explore the community and community events. I mean, there's cool things happening in the community and things that don't cost a lot of money. And if you look at the Explore La Crosse website, they talk about a lot of things that are going on, outside of Oktoberfest and the fests. And those are fun. I go to all those. Irish Fest is probably my favorite, but I love all of our festivals. But there are so many cool other things going on in the community. So I would say try to take advantage of those too. And I think we're at 7:29, so I think I'm done. So I don't know if any of you have questions for me, or if you want to share what it's like being a student during time of COVID. I think we should all be writing journals right now. Everything that's happened this last year, it's really been, I mean, this has been an incredible year of historic events. I think people are going to look back at this year, and the position that you are all in is one unique, I think, to students that would be interesting to hear about.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Amy.
Okay, perfect. First of all, I always like hearing you speak whenever I go to your event, so thank you. Also, so my question is basically, is there an example that you can think of, especially when you were on county board or a smaller level of government, where there was a policy or an issue that was pushed to the agenda or raised a lot of discussion within legislation, specifically because of community action or because of students voicing their thoughts?
Let me think about local government on county board. I can't really think of an issue that was specific to students on county board. In the state legislature, yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that there were a lot of issues on county board that we talked about that affected students, but that were specific to students. Honestly, not that I can think of. But in the state, absolutely 100%. I mean, I talked with the governor, I talked to students on campus with Jen, with Senator Schilling, our previous senator. Now we have Senator Paff, who's great. I really like working with him. He's really good. But Senator Schilling and I were on campus talking about mental health with students and hearing about weight, that I couldn't believe it, that there was like a month-long waiting list to see a counselor. And So talking with the governor about that, and he included more money for mental health for students. So that made me happy. He included that in the budget. Some student debt. I've worked on student debt issues in the Capitol for relief for students and families. I've worked on free speech on campus. I gave a floor speech on the assembly, which was probably one of my favorite floor speeches that I gave on free speech on campus, and I deliberated on that issue twice in committee. And, I don't think that we as a legislature need to really legislate that. I think that campuses, it's best handled on campuses. And I think campuses are different. So I think I don't think that we need to micromanage that. That's my opinion on free speech on campus. We've looked at things like reciprocity, making transfer of credits easier. There's a lot of issues that we've really dealt with. And of course, all the building commission stuff, the buildings on campuses, trying to get Prairie Springs through, and several of projects that have gone through, like the field house, and there's some stuff for Halls. Whittick was one. But I mean, that's not, I don't, that doesn't affect, I mean, a lot of students like Prairie Springs too, you'll be gone by the time it's there. But so I think those are kind of the issues that I've dealt with. On county board, there are some things with probably Health and Human Services that create a better community that would affect students and people outside of campus. But yeah, I can't think of anything specific to campus.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like, what's most likely to make actionable change that you hear of when you get letters, or when you hear data, or you get emails, like, just what makes it more likely to get pushed somewhere and get recognition?
That's a great question. I'm working on some legislation now. I talked to John Menninger about this, who was the mayor of La Crosse. He was a state assembly rep. He was on the county board, and he worked for Feingold, Cole, and Baldwin, those three senators. He knows more about politics than anybody. And I think he teaches on campus, doesn't he? I thought he used to teach a government class on campus. Anyway, so John said, talking to Senator Baldwin, it's like there's a certain percentage of legislation that you can work on because you're passionate about. And then a certain percentage of legislation you work on because your constituency asks for it. Actually, my human trafficking bill, that was inspired by a conference on campus, a conference on human trafficking. And one of my constituents then said, can't you do something about this? And so I started looking at issues on human trafficking and worked on some different legislation. This is my most recent one. But a good ask, I just got one, and I'm working on the bill for some disabled hunters. And a good ask is, like, if you want a legislator to change a law, I think it's good to kind of do a little research, find out what the current state is, and then be specific with the legislator. Although this, with human trafficking, they just looked at me and said, can't you do something about this? That was pretty general. But I think it's helpful if you ask specifically make a specific ask, and then just say, could you, I always get back to everybody, but just I'm really interested in hearing back from you on this. I think it's good to say that too. Yeah, I think, just be specific. And, sometimes it's stuff that's, sometimes I'm happiest when I can help out the person that contacts me. And sometimes it's legislation somebody's already working on. I had coffee with somebody who said, can you ban plastic bags? But somebody was already working on that. Someone from Appleton area, a legislator from the Appleton area was already working on that. So then I can at least give information and pass the bill to my constituent, or, talk to them about what's being done. Sometimes people want me to sign on to a bill, and then often I will if it seems to make sense and something often I will. I just signed on to a bill for there's the railroad track that goes along the river. Historically, there's been people who fish, anglers and trappers, and people that want access to the river have been able to cross that railroad track. Then the railroad company hired a security guard who's very aggressive about patrolling that, and he's handing out tickets to people now. So there's a bill that says that people can cross railroad tracks, and my locals wanted me to sign on to it. Normally, I wouldn't have signed on to that. But I can see both sides of the issue, where it's a safety issue, also access to the river. Those are the two things you have to weigh. That's kind of a tough one. But I signed on to it. I gave extra weight because several people in my district had issues with it, and they asked if I would sign on to it. I got a call from the railroad company within 2 weeks, and they were yelling at me. But, you got to take the lumps. I'm like, okay, let's hear it. Let's have the conversation. But my people asked me to do it. And so, and we had a good discussion. I'll have a open discussion. I don't expect everybody to agree with me. That's okay. Maybe that's part of the thick skin side.
Yeah, thanks so much. That helps a lot. Shed some clarity. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's worthwhile to contact legislators. I know some people think it doesn't make a difference. I think it does. I can think of specific issues where, like the early childhood education stuff I'm working on right now, so much of child brain development happens in those first 3 years of life. But we fund like pre-K out to higher ed, and we don't help out at all here. And people can't find childcare for their kids. And 80% of infants have moms that want to work outside the house. But if there's no daycare, they're staying home. And employers need workforce. And so I'm working on that, and more parents are weighing in, more employers are weighing in. And finally, more eyes are being turned toward that issue. And I think that that's going to be something that might stay in the budget, at least in part, hopefully, because people are contacting their legislators about it and saying this is a crisis. Anybody else have any questions or want to talk about COVID? How is school going for you? Amy,
For me?
Yeah, for you, Amy, how is it going?
Yeah, it's actually going pretty well. I actually was part-time last semester, just because it wasn't really my learning style, and I think that was probably a good idea for me. And so this semester I'm back to full-time, and yeah, I think half my classes are online and half are in person. And it's definitely different. I'm in non-traditional classrooms, like I'm in the theater in one of my classes, and one of my professors is in person and then team taught, and the other professors is on Zoom on the projector. So it's very interesting. Wouldn't have expected that that's what the format would have been, but it's definitely like opened up experience to being in different learning environments and not just sitting in a classroom. But yeah, it's definitely different.
So are you dining in the dining hall like normal, or is it everything's open for students to sit together and eat together, or how's that going?
I'm off campus right now. I know we have some dining facilities open. I'm sure Kelsey probably knows a bit more than it about me, but I can see students in the union at least. I'm not quite sure what the dining hall is like right now.
Huh.
Yeah, I believe they can sit two to a table in the dining hall. If you probably have the best on this since you're living in the halls, but they in the union there is 15-minute dining, so they have one person per table, and there's signs that you can flip saying that the table's dirty, and you can eat your dinner or lunch in there and then move to another location for studying and things like that.
Okay. And are places like the library open?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
the
and
library.
Rec Center, Eagle Rec Center's open?
I believe the rec center is open. I go to the YMCA because I would rather work out with old ladies that like talk to me than college students. But yeah, I'm not too sure. But I go to the library that's open.
I believe the rec is open and just like with limited number of people in different areas.
Okay.
I know for the rec that if you want to use like any of the weightlifting equipment or the newer part of the rec, then you have to make a reservation. But there are like the part with the track is and like the basketball courts, anyone can just go in there.
Okay. Interesting. How do you date during COVID? I just think about, I mean, when I was in college, that just like the social side of things, I mean, and I know some students are still doing it. I can see when I walk through the neighborhoods or drive around, I can see some people are still getting together, and I see people in front yards meeting and stuff like that. I just think, yeah, I'm someone who's seen like my little group of 6 people. We were sitting outside around fire pits in, when it was 38 degrees out. The best thing I did is early as winter started, I bought some Bogs boots that are good for like 35 below zero and not very attractive, but they are warm and wonderful. And so I remember my 20s and I'm like, whoa, we've got to get through this. For the mental health for so many people in our country. We've got to get through this.
I had a friend in the fall who bought a house, and they bought a projector, and they had a white garage door, and we projected movies off of their garage so we could all be together outside.
Fun. That's a great idea. Yeah. Are there events on campus yet? I'm sure there's not, like the theater must not be performances yet, huh? Or like sports, can people go to sporting events or?
Tonight we are actually having our first band live on campus all year.
Wow.
They were supposed to be outside, but it was moved indoors because the weather was iffy tonight. But this month we're just starting some in-person events outside. And so last weekend, the Campus Activities Board played Wally, was it, Liv? Outside both Friday and Saturday, or Thursday and Friday night. And so the students had to make reservations to go to it. And we had hula hoops outside, so the students would sit in the hula hoops to keep their distance. We are starting some in-person events, but not a ton of things yet.
Okay. Yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there? Yeah, I'm going to the at the end of this week, I'm going to go to the Chicago Institute of Art to see the Monet exhibit. Hopefully it won't be crowded, but I've been vaccinated at Cleary Center. How are vaccinations going on campus? Do students seem like they are like ready to get vaccinated? Are people taking part or?
So I live in the residence hall that's right across from Cleary, and I was able to sign up a little bit before because I work for the university in the student union. But a lot of people that I know have been able to get vaccinated, and especially being so close to the vaccination site, if students are like walking past or if they have extra at the end of the night, people that work there will kind of just like approach students and ask if they want it. And a lot of times that's been a way where people who are maybe further down on the list have been able to get it quicker.
Oh, that's great. I
Mhm.
didn't know that that was happening.
Yeah, so typically at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock when they're wrapping up, they'll go out and try to find more students who haven't gotten it yet.
Nice. That's been a situation in my work where I felt like I could make a difference early on. We weren't getting, others were getting vaccine and we weren't getting ours here when it was early, when healthcare workers are being vaccinated. And so I advocated very strongly with the governor's office and with the Department of Health Services. And then we got it. The hospitals called me and said, we got it. And I was like, yes. That was a nice moment where I felt like I could make a difference. Anybody have any other comments or questions?
Hey, Jill, this is Antoina. Good to see you.
Hey, how are you? I was talking about you 2 nights ago with Judy Slike.
Well, I'm gonna turn on my video, but I'm at the Y, so I'm like in the hallway just so I could join the conversation tonight. But actually, it won't let me turn it on, so you'll just have to listen to my voice.
It's
But
great to hear your
can
voice.
you maybe share with the students, like, what are some strategies or tips or things that you do to kind of cope or manage through stress? Like, you're doing a lot, as you said, you work with a lot of different constituents, and sometimes, it's some nice things and not so nice things, but you're on the go all the time. So can you maybe share with students that are interested in being public servants how you manage the day-to-day stress?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, as I said earlier, I walk in the marsh, or I'll go on a bike ride or hike the bluffs. Exercise helps me a lot. Sometimes I look like the strange person who's talking to myself out there, because I'll actually practice. When I had the interview with Capital City Sunday, I practiced in the marsh some of the things that I wanted to say, kind of talked it through in my head, the important points that I had to hit. And also, I mean, it helps with stress, being out there. That's probably my biggest way. Unhealthy way, when I have to, I mean, part of this job is really fundraising. I haven't talked about the campaign side of this a whole lot, but part of that is fundraising. So that's more of a reward than a stress thing, I guess, is make myself make a call to ask someone for money, and then I get an M&M. That's my reward. I mean, that's a motivator, because that's a hard thing. I grew up in a family where you don't ask someone for money, you just don't do that. So that was a hard one for me in the beginning, because you can't do it alone. You can't do it on your own. And so that's not really stress related, though. And this isn't a healthy one, but sometimes at the end of the day, I'll have a glass of wine with friends, just to, have someone to talk to. And I have some friends that are not political at all. And my family is a little bit like that too. My mom, I think she still can't believe I'm a state representative. And so it's nice to be around people who aren't political sometimes, and just like talk about something else and focus on other things. Yeah, those are probably the biggest. I've struggled with workload and saying no. That's one thing I would talk to students about. In college, I was not great at saying no. I had to learn that lesson. And then I had to relearn it. Like when I was a president of the student body, I'm talking to irate Lutheran parents about our alcohol policy. I'm like, why am I doing this? Shouldn't the dean of students be doing this or something? But she asked me to do it. And so I said yes. Now, and then I kind of got when this job, I just love learning about new things and being part of, of working together with people. So I've had to learn to say no again, because it's not just hard on me, and it's hard on my staff, because my staff has their workload increases as mine does. And when our freshman class came in, we have more people of color, we have more women than we've ever had before, just smart, good legislators or new legislators. And so I gave up some stuff like tourism. Sheila Stubbs, great legislator, Black woman from Madison, great voice, great, smart presence. She's a great ambassador for tourism. I don't have to do that. Someone else can do that. I can share the workload, and then you share the knowledge, right? It's good to have more than one person talking about tourism. And it's a huge, important industry in our state. But it's also an awesome committee, because that group is, they're very welcoming and, friendly. That's what tourism people do. So I loved that. And it was a good fit for me, but it's a great fit for Sheila. And so Representative Stubbs, I should say. So she's got it. So, I mean, that helped, all these good new people coming in, and I had faith in them. And I'm like, I don't have to do everything. So I could have a more reasonable workload. That helps with stress, right? Kind of, you don't have to do everything. And Tuan, I know that I know a lot is asked of you too. So I hope you can do that sometimes. I hope you can say no sometimes.
I'm gonna laugh out loud. I was trying to find my reaction button. Jill, it doesn't work that way. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can get together soon. Miss seeing you and chatting with you. But I wanted to make sure I was here to support you. And I think it was maybe Amy said it. You're always one of my favorite people to listen to too. So I hope you're well, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you're well and your family is too. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you face to face.
Yeah, we got some stuff to talk about.
We do.
So I'll let the students take over, and then I'm gonna send my phone number in the chat. I'm supposed to be at basketball practice right now, so I was like, this is how high priority Jill Billings is on my list. Everybody on the call, but I'll put my phone number in there to reach out, and then let's connect on one of those Fridays when you're home.
I'd love that. I would love that. Thank you, my friend.
All right, take care, y'all. Thanks, Kelsey and Liv, for sending me the information.
Of course, thank you.
How nice. Anybody else have anything that they want to share?
All right, if there's no other questions or any comments or sort of things, I think we can just kind of wrap up. Thank you again to our wonderful speaker, Representative Jill Billings. I think there's a lot of great presentation and conversation that came with that. So thank you so much. And thank you all for showing up and participating tonight.
Thank you all. This was it was a nice part of my day to look forward to be able to speak with you. Thanks.